Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Brian Lassard, also known as Bri the Fly Guy, and I'm an entomologist, a scientist that studies insects, particularly flies. Part of my work is naming and classifying new species, which is a subscience known as taxonomy. This allows us to identify species and give them a universal language so other scientists can study them. When you think of flies, you might think of the tiny little bush fly that annoys you when you go on a hike, but there are 30,000 species of flies in Australia. Scientists estimate that we've only described a quarter of all life on Earth, so each day we're discovering species new to science. I've been lucky enough to describe and name up to 50 new species of flies from Australia and New Zealand. And the best part about describing a species is that you get to name it whatever you'd like. The first species I had ever named was a bright golden horsefly from Queensland, and I was listening to a lot of this particular artist while examining the species under the microscope. So I named it after the one and only Beyonce. Plynthina beyonceae is the official name, and it sparked a global conversation on why flies and the science of naming species is so important. Describing a species is the first step to really understanding what they do in the ecosystem and why they're important. This year, I've discovered and published 7 new species of beautiful metallic and rainbow soldier flies from areas affected by the recent bushfires. Now that these beautiful species are formally recognized by science, they can be included in future conservation and management programs. When you think of flies, you might think they're really annoying, but they have really amazing roles in the ecosystem that we take for granted, like pollination. Horseflies are really cool because it's only the females that bite you because they need the protein in your blood to ripen their eggs. But they're also really cool pollinators as well, drinking nectar from flowers during the day. They have really hairy beards, actually we call them beards, and they get covered in pollen. And as they go from one flower to the other, they help pollinate flowers as well. What's really exciting is that you can use DNA technology to see what species of plants these flies are actually pollinating. We've extracted the DNA from the pollen attached to the horseflies and found that they can actually pollinate 15 different types of plants, including some of Australia's most iconic tea trees and eucalyptus species. I'm also working on Aussie mozzies, the mosquitoes. Mosquitoes transfer diseases that can cause up to 8,000 cases of human diseases in Australia each year. I'm adopting new cutting-edge technologies to be able to get DNA out of historic pin specimens held in museums, so we can build a DNA database to accurately identify Australia's mosquitoes. There are 400 species of mosquitoes known in Australia, but only half of them have formal scientific names. So I'm working to describe these unknown species so we can better understand them, identify them, and separate them from species that can cause serious diseases to humans and animals in Australia. I wasn't always into flies. Growing up, I always thought they were a nuisance, but it wasn't until undergraduate biology where I learned that flies could help solve crimes. You could use the size of a maggot to identify how long someone has been dead for. So I thought that was pretty cool, so I started researching them. And the weirdest part of my career was actually feeding maggots. I was a maggot caretaker as a lab assistant in a forensic entomology lab. And each day I would have to feed the maggots rotting meat so we could do studies to see how long it takes for them to reach certain sizes and be used as forensic indicators in cases of crime. Except I couldn't really smell the maggots after a while. My nose kind of got used to how disgusting it was, thank goodness. But I went to a lot of lectures with my friends, and they'd sit right next to me to start with and then realize, hang on, what is that funky smell? They'd all look at me and then they'd leave. They did not want to sit next to me at all because I smelled like rotting death. Fair enough. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to know more about my work or ask me a question, follow me on social media. And never stop asking questions because you never know where they'll end up taking you.